My name is Emily, and at 31, I truly believed I had everything under control. Life had been good, better than good, actually. 2 years ago, I landed a major promotion at work, and it felt like all the pieces of my life were finally clicking into place. The salary increase meant I could comfortably cover my mortgage, enjoy small luxuries, and even start giving back to the people who had raised me. That's when I decided to help my parents financially. Emily, sweetheart, you really don't have to do this, Mom had said when I first mentioned setting up the monthly transfers. I want to, I assured her, already tapping away on my phone to set up a $1,500 automatic payment. I'm in a good place financially, and this is the least I can do to thank you both for everything you've done for me. Dad had pulled Mom into a side hug, his eyes shining with what I thought was pride. We raised a good one, Lisa, he said, voice thick with emotion. For the first few months, it felt amazing. Every time the money hit their account, Mom would call, gushing about how lucky they were to have such a thoughtful daughter. Dad would joke about having a sugar daughter instead of a sugar daddy, and we'd all laugh. It felt good to help. But as they say, no good deed goes unpunished. And I was about to learn that lesson in the harshest way possible. It started subtly. The grateful phone calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. At first, I didn't think much of it. Life gets busy, right? But then came the requests. Emily, honey, Mom called one evening, her voice casual. Our coffee maker just died. You wouldn't believe the noise it made. Any chance you could help us replace it? Of course, I said without hesitation. It was just a coffee maker after all. But then came the request for a new vacuum, then an upgraded washer and dryer, then a larger flat-screen TV, because, according to Dad, their eyes weren't what they used to be. Each request was bigger than the last, each one presented with a carefully crafted story about why it was urgent. I justified it in my head. They were retired, and I had the means to help. But something in my gut told me that this was starting to get out of hand. The breaking point came on a particularly exhausting Friday night. I had just wrapped up a grueling week at work when Mom called, her voice dripping with that same sugary tone she used when asking for favors. So, we were thinking maybe a new smart fridge? You know, the ones that show the grocery list on the screen? It would really make things easier for us. I sighed, pressing my fingers to my temple. Mom, I need you to understand something. I'm not printing money in my basement. I work hard for it. I love helping you guys, but this? It's getting to be too much. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence that stretched long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. I see, Mom finally said, her voice clipped. Well, I wouldn't want to burden you. And then she hung up. That was the last time I heard from them for weeks. Sunday dinners, once a sacred tradition in our family, stopped without warning. My texts went unanswered. The usual check-in calls I'd get from my parents, gone. It was like I had been erased from their world overnight. Thankfully, my younger brother, Jake, still kept me in the loop. They're acting like you committed a crime, he told me, barely suppressing a laugh. Mom's been telling everyone you abandoned them over a stupid fridge. You're kidding. I wish, he sighed. You know how they are. Remember when I went on my honeymoon and didn't call them for 3 days? Mom acted like I had died. I chuckled despite the frustration. So, they're giving me the silent treatment? Over appliances? Pretty much. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they just needed time. But as the weeks stretched into months, the distance between us solidified into something heavier. Then came Thanksgiving. I decided enough was enough. Armed with homemade pumpkin pie, Dad's favorite, I showed up at their doorstep unannounced, determined to smooth things over. When Mom opened the door, her expression flickered between surprise and something unreadable. Dad appeared behind her, looking hesitant. For a moment, I thought they'd slam the door in my face. But after a long pause, they let me in. Jake and his wife Lauren were already there, sitting in the living room. The atmosphere was tense, but as the evening progressed, things started to feel normal. The warmth of family, the easy laughter, the shared memories, it was all still there, buried beneath the recent tension. And then Dad dropped a bombshell. We've been thinking, he said, setting his fork down. What if we all took a trip to Europe early next year? Maybe France or Italy? Mom's face lit up. We've been planning it with Jake and Lauren. You have to come. Emily, it wouldn't be the same without you. I hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden proposal. A family trip sounded nice. And after the past few months, maybe this was exactly what we needed. You know what? I said, smiling. That actually sounds great. I could use a vacation. For the first time in months, I felt like we were a family again. We spent the rest of the evening discussing destinations, pulling up photos of Paris and Rome, and talking about all the food we wanted to try. That night, as I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Maybe things really were getting back to normal. Maybe we just needed a reset, if only I had known what was coming next. The weeks following Thanksgiving were surprisingly peaceful. The Sunday dinners returned, and my parents acted as if the whole fridge incident had never happened. I wasn't about to bring it up either. I figured if they were willing to move on, so was I. But something was different. The conversations always seemed to steer back to the Europe trip. Mom would casually mention how amazing it would be to experience the vineyards in France. Dad would go on about how much he wanted to see the Colosseum in Rome. Jake and Lauren were already picking out restaurants and sightseeing spots. I was excited too, don't get me wrong. It had been years since we'd taken a family vacation, and part of me really did miss those moments. But something in my gut told me I was missing a piece of the puzzle. That missing piece hit me square in the face on Christmas Eve. I arrived at my parents' house with my arms full of carefully wrapped presents, eager to make the holiday special. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, twinkling lights reflecting off the windows. Jake and Lauren were already there, sipping wine by the fireplace. Merry Christmas! Mom greeted me with a hug that felt just a little too sweet. The night started off fine. The usual holiday small talk, the warmth of family, the cheerful atmosphere, it was all there. We exchanged gifts, and I made sure to put extra thought into mine. Mom got a designer handbag she'd been eyeing. Dad unwrapped a sleek new smartwatch, and Jake and Lauren received a high-end espresso machine for their kitchen. Their gifts to me? A generic scarf and a gift card to a store I rarely shopped at. I didn't say anything. Christmas wasn't about gifts after all. But then, after a few glasses of wine, the energy in the room shifted. Mom kept exchanging glances with Dad, while Jake and Lauren seemed unusually focused on their plates. I could tell something was coming. So, Emily, Mom started, her voice syrupy sweet. We've been talking about the Europe trip. I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. Yeah, I can't wait. Have you guys picked a final destination yet? Well, Dad cleared his throat. We actually found this amazing package deal for all 5 of us. Flights, hotels, tours, everything included. I smiled. Nice. What's the total cost? Mom's smile widened. Since you're doing so well at work, we figured it made the most sense for you to cover the expenses for everyone. The wine glass froze halfway to my lips. I'm sorry, what? Jake, who had been suspiciously quiet, finally spoke up. I mean, you do make more than all of us combined. I let out a short laugh, certain I had misheard them. Are you seriously asking me to pay for a full European vacation for 5 people? Mom waved her hand dismissively. Not asking, dear. We just figured this was the best way to do it. You can afford it, and it would mean so much to the family. I glanced at Jake, expecting him to step in and say anything, but he just gave a small shrug, like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. This is insane, I said, setting my drink down. I'm happy to pay for my trip, but I'm not bankrolling an entire vacation for everyone. Do you even realize how much that would cost? Dad's face darkened. Emily, don't be selfish. Think about what this trip means for us. Selfish? I scoffed. I've been sending you $1,500 a month for 2 years. I helped pay for Jake and Lauren's wedding. I've bought every single thing you've asked for, new appliances, tech upgrades, whatever you wanted. And now I'm selfish because I won't pay for your vacation? The room fell into a suffocating silence. Mom's expression hardened. If you won't contribute to this family properly, maybe it's best if you leave. I felt my heart squeeze. Are you kidding me? Dad simply nodded, backing her up. Your mother's right. Jake and Lauren sat there, silent, like this wasn't their problem. The betrayal stung worse than anything. I grabbed my coat and stood up. You know what? Merry Christmas. And then I walked out. That night, as I sat in my apartment, staring at my silent phone, something in me snapped. I opened my banking app and, with steady hands, canceled the automatic transfers. Then I texted my mom, monthly transfers canceled. Merry Christmas. Her response came almost instantly. This just proves what we already knew. You're selfish and greedy. Don't bother contacting us again. I stared at the message, numb. For the first time in years, I realized something. I wasn't losing a family. I was losing people who had been using me. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: relief. With a cup of coffee in hand, I pulled out my laptop and started searching for vacation destinations. Not to Europe, though, Hawaii. Within hours, I had booked a 2-week stay at a beachfront resort in Maui. If I was going to spend thousands of dollars on a trip, it was going to be on me. No guilt, no obligations. Just me, the ocean, and the peace I desperately needed. The weeks that followed were eerily silent. No calls, no texts, nothing. Jake didn't reach out. Not even once. My parents had made good on their threat to cut me off, and honestly, it hurt less than I expected. Instead of wallowing, I focused on work, on myself. I started taking yoga classes, joined a book club, and finally had time to do things I enjoyed. Then February rolled around. Out of curiosity, I checked Jake's Instagram. There they were: Mom, Dad, Jake, and Lauren grinning in front of the Eiffel Tower, posing in front of the Colosseum, eating at fancy restaurants. So they had gone without me. And they looked happy. I should have felt devastated, betrayed. But instead, I felt free. Because while they were posting photos from Paris, one was boarding a plane to Maui. The second my feet hit the warm sand, I breathed in the salty air and knew, without a doubt, that I had made the right choice. For 2 weeks, I lived in paradise. Surfing lessons, hiking through waterfalls, sunset dinners by the beach. I met incredible people, spent entire afternoons lost in books, and finally felt the weight of my family's expectations lift off my shoulders. You seem like you just let go of something heavy, a woman I met at a yoga class told me one morning. I smiled, watching the waves roll in. Yeah, I said, I really did. But life has a funny way of testing you. Because just when I thought I was free from their grip, just when I thought I had escaped the cycle, my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my stomach twisting. We hadn't spoken in months, and I knew deep in my gut I wasn't going to like whatever came next. I stared at my phone, watching Mom's name flash on the screen. For months, there had been nothing but silence from my family. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive comment on social media. They had made their choice and I had made mine, so why now? Something in my gut told me this wasn't a call I wanted to take, but curiosity, or maybe just old habits, made me answer. Hello? There was a pause. Then Mom's voice, brittle and unfamiliar. Emily, we need you to come over. No hi, no how are you, just a demand. Typical. I exhaled sharply. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, she interrupted, her voice softer now. And then, for the first time in my life, I heard something in her tone that made my stomach tighten. Fear. I hesitated. If this was another ploy to guilt me, I wasn't falling for it. But if something serious was going on, I ran a hand through my hair, already regretting my next words. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than usual, my mind running through possibilities. Was someone sick? Had something happened to Jake? When I pulled into the driveway, my stomach dropped. The house looked different. The once pristine lawn was overgrown, the flower beds empty. Dad's prized car, the one he babied like a second child, was missing from its usual spot. Mom opened the door before I could knock. I barely recognized her. She looked smaller. Her usual polished appearance was gone, no makeup, no jewelry, just exhaustion written all over her face. Dad sat in his recliner, staring blankly at the floor. He looked years older than the last time I'd seen him. Neither of them greeted me. What's going on? I asked, still standing by the door. Mom wrung her hands together, her lips trembling. It's Jake. My heart clenched. What about him? She took a shaky breath. He and Lauren. She choked on her words, looking at Dad for help. Dad finally looked at me, his eyes hollow. They stole from us. I blinked. What? Mom let out a sob. When we were in Europe, They went to Monte Carlo. Oh no. They took our credit card, Dad added. We thought they were just sightseeing, but he rubbed a hand over his face. They went to a casino. A heavy silence settled in the room. I swallowed. How much? Mom let out a ragged breath. Almost 50,000. I nearly dropped my purse. $50,000? How is that even possible? Credit card limit? Dad mumbled. Plus cash advances. I stared at them, waiting for the part where they told me they'd reported it as fraud, that the bank had wiped the charges, but they weren't looking at me. A horrible realization settled over me. You let them use your card, didn't you? Mom flinched. We, she stammered, we gave them permission for emergencies. We had no idea they would, so the bank won't wipe the charges. My voice came out flat. Dad just nodded. I ran a hand down my face. This was a nightmare. I wanted to feel bad for them. Really, I did. But all I could think about was the way they had thrown me out on Christmas, the way they had called me selfish while enabling Jake and Lauren's every whim. And now they were paying the price. I sighed. Okay, what do you want from me? Mom's head snapped up, her eyes desperate. We need help. The bank is demanding repayment, and we don't have that kind of money. I crossed my arms. So let me get this straight. You cut me off when I refused to pay for your luxury vacation. But now that Jake has ruined you financially, suddenly I'm part of the family again? Mom's face crumpled. Emily, please. No. The word was out before I could even think about it. Dad sat up, his voice sharp. She's your sister, Emily. She made a mistake. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. Jake and Lauren stole 50 grand from you and didn't even bother to tell you until you found out yourselves. They're struggling, Mom tried again. They might lose their house. I arched an eyebrow. You didn't care when I walked out of your house on Christmas. Funny how that works. Tears welled in Mom's eyes, but I didn't feel bad. For years, I had been their safety net. Every financial problem, every little inconvenience, I had been the solution. They had never once worried about consequences because they had me to bail them out. Not anymore. Let them figure it out, I said. Mom let out a sob. How can you be so heartless? I exhaled, shaking my head. You know, that's exactly what you said to me when I told you I wasn't paying for your vacation. And look how that turned out. Dad's jaw tightened. So you're just going to let your family suffer? You let me suffer, I shot back. You made it clear that I was only valuable to this family when I was paying for things. The moment I stopped, you tossed me aside. So, no, I'm not bailing you out. Mom's face twisted. We don't need you anyway, she spat. We'll figure this out without your help. I shrugged. Good luck with that. And then I walked out. For weeks, the calls and messages flooded in. Mom, Dad, even extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to talk. It was the same story, over and over. Jake and Lauren are in trouble. The bank is threatening legal action. They could lose everything. Not my problem. I blocked their numbers. Then one night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find someone I never expected, Lauren's sister, Hannah. She looked nervous. Can I come in? I stepped aside, curiosity piqued. Once she was seated, she sighed. I just wanted you to know. You're right not to help them. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Hannah nodded. Jake and Lauren have been gambling for years. They've racked up debt before, but your parents always bailed them out. I tried to warn them, but they didn't listen. This isn't new, Emily. It's just worse this time. I clenched my jaw. Did my parents know? She hesitated. I think they chose not to see it. That hit harder than I expected. All these years, they had told themselves Jake was the golden child, the responsible one. And when things got bad, they just looked the other way. Now, they had no choice but to face reality. And for the first time, it wasn't my burden to carry. A week later, I did something unexpected. I compiled a list of financial advisors and gambling addiction resources. Then I sent an email to my parents, Jake and Lauren. No money, no sympathy, just a path forward if they were willing to take it. Mom responded within minutes. We don't need this. We need you. I didn't reply because I finally understood something. They never needed me. They needed what I could give them. And that was no longer an option. After I sent that email, I knew without a doubt there was no going back. I had drawn a line in the sand, and my family? They weren't going to cross it. At first, there was silence. No responses, no pleading texts, no guilt-tripping voicemails. It almost felt peaceful, but I should have known better. Because people like my parents and Jake, they don't just let things go. 2 weeks passed before the storm hit. It started with a message from my Aunt Mom's sister, Carol. Emily, I don't know what's going on between you and your parents, but they're in a really bad place. You need to fix this before it's too late. I sighed, tossing my phone onto the couch. Here we go. For years, my parents had painted me as the responsible one, the good daughter, and now they were flipping the script, playing the helpless victims while I became the villain. I ignored the message. Then came the calls from other relatives, uncles, cousins, people who had never once cared about my life, suddenly had opinions about my choices. Emily, family is everything. How can you turn your back on your own blood? They're struggling, and you're just sitting back, doing nothing? Every single time, I said the same thing. They got themselves into this mess. They can get themselves out. Of course, no one liked that answer. But I wasn't here to make people comfortable. I was here to protect myself. Then one day, something happened that shook me. I was at work, halfway through answering emails, when my office phone rang. Emily Daniels speaking. Silence. Then a heavy sigh. It's Dad. I clenched my jaw. It had been months since I'd heard his voice. What do you want? There was a pause. I just wanted to talk. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Talk about what? About us? I exhaled slowly. There is no use anymore, Dad. You made that clear. Emily, please. This has gotten out of hand. I almost laughed. Oh, now it's out of hand? Dad, let's cut to the chase. Do you need money? Silence. And that was my answer. I shook my head. Unbelievable. It's not just about the money, he rushed to say. Your mother's a wreck. She cries every night. She chose this. I cut in. You both did. Dad's voice dropped to a whisper. We just thought. Maybe you'd reconsider. I let out a humorless chuckle. Right. Because the first time I said no worked out so well for me. Emily, please. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of my desk. Dad, let me ask you something. If I had paid for that trip, if I had given in, do you think any of this would have turned out differently? He hesitated. And that silence told me everything. No, I answered for him. It wouldn't have. You still would have gone to Europe. Jake still would have stolen from you. And I'd still be nothing more than a walking ATM to this family. That's not fair, Dad muttered. No, what's not fair is being treated like I owe you something just because I have a good job. What's not fair is being abandoned the second I stopped giving. What's not fair is the fact that, even now, you still don't see the problem. Dad exhaled sharply. So, that's it? You're just going to let your family fall apart? I closed my eyes. No, Dad. You let this family fall apart. I just finally walked away from the wreckage. A long pause. Then, finally, he spoke. I hope you can live with yourself, Emily. The line went dead, and I just sat there, staring at my desk, feeling nothing. Not guilt, not regret, just exhaustion. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Jake. I get it. You're mad. But don't you think you've punished Mom and Dad enough? I stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then another one came in. They raised you. They sacrificed for you. And now you're just gonna let them struggle? And just like that, the exhaustion turned into rage. They sacrificed for me? Was that a joke? Because last I checked, I had been the one sacrificing for them. I started typing. Let me tell you something, Jake. When I was paying their mortgage, their bills, their luxuries, did they ever once stop to think about what I needed? Did you? I kept going. You call this punishment, but I call it consequences. You made your bed, now lie in it. Then I blocked his number. I was done. Weeks passed. The calls slowed down. The messages became less frequent. And for the first time in years, my life felt like mine. I went to work without dreading my phone ringing. I spent weekends actually enjoying myself, brunch with friends, lazy mornings reading in bed, solo trips to new places. And you know what? It felt good. It felt free. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from an unexpected number, Hannah. Lauren's sister. I hesitated before picking up. Hey, I answered cautiously. Hey, Emily, she said. I thought you should know something. I sat up. What is it? She hesitated. Your parents. They had to sell the house. I blinked. Wait, what? She sighed. They used up their retirement savings trying to pay off the debt. Then they took out a second mortgage. But it wasn't enough. They're moving into a small apartment next month. I swallowed hard. I had known this was coming. The numbers didn't lie. But still, hearing it felt different. And Jake? I asked. Hannah's voice turned bitter. He and Lauren filed for bankruptcy. They lost their house too. I sat there gripping my phone. I wasn't happy to hear it, but I wasn't surprised either. They're saying it's your fault, Hannah added after a pause. That if you had just helped, none of this would have happened. Of course they were. I let out a slow breath. Thanks for telling me. No problem, she said. And for what it's worth, you did the right thing. After we hung up, I stared out the window for a long time. Did I feel guilty? A little. Did I regret my decision? Not for a second. Because at the end of the day, I had saved myself. And if that made me the villain in their story, so be it. The news of my parents losing their house should have hit me harder. But honestly, I just felt tired, not relieved, not victorious, just bone-deep exhaustion. For years, I had carried the weight of this family, paid their bills, covered their luxuries, put my own needs second. And now that I had finally stepped away, they were paying the price for their choices. And yet, somehow, I was still the villain. I expected more messages after that. More guilt-tripping, more attempts to break me down. But instead, silence. Not a word from Mom. Not a single call from Dad. Even Jake, who had never been able to keep his mouth shut, had finally gone quiet. I should have felt at peace. But a part of me, some stubborn, still wounded part, kept waiting. For what? I didn't know. Maybe some kind of acknowledgement. Maybe just the truth. Then, one afternoon, I got an email. From Mom. I stared at the subject line for a long time. We need to talk. Not please. Not I'm sorry. Just another demand. I could have ignored it. Should have, probably. But against my better judgment, I opened it. It wasn't long. Emily, I know you probably hate us right now, but I need you to understand that everything we did was for family. We never meant to make you feel used, and if you had just helped us, none of this would have happened. We're struggling. We've lost so much. And honestly, I don't know how we'll recover from this. But at the end of the day, we're still your family. And no matter what, you'll always be our daughter. I hope you'll remember that before it's too late. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. No apology, no accountability, just more blame, more emotional blackmail. If you had just helped us, none of this would have happened. I closed my laptop. I had my answer. That night, I sat in my apartment replaying everything in my head. The years of sacrifice, the manipulation, the way they had discarded me the second I set a boundary. And I thought about something my therapist had once told me. You're not responsible for other people's choices. You can only be responsible for your own. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' approval, trying to be good enough, trying to prove my worth through money, through self-sacrifice. But the truth was, I had never been their daughter. I had been their safety net, their solution. And now that I had stepped away, they didn't know what to do with me. And maybe that was their problem, not mine. A few days later, I got a call from Aunt Carol. Hey, sweetie, she said, her voice hesitant. I just wanted to check in. I sighed, already knowing where this was going. Carol, I know. She cut in quickly. I'm not here to pressure you. I thought you should know something. I leaned back on my couch. What now? She hesitated. Your mom's been asking about you. At church mostly. I think she misses you. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. She had a funny way of showing it. Carol sighed. Emily, I'm not saying what they did was right. I told them they messed up. But they're lost without you. I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. They were fine when they were spending my money. I know, she admitted. But people do stupid things when they're desperate. And your mom, she's never been good at admitting when she's wrong. That much was obvious. Carol hesitated again, then said softly, "Just think about it, okay? She's still your mother." And that was the problem, wasn't it? Because mothers were supposed to protect their children, not drain them dry, not throw them away the second they stopped being useful, not break them down and then demand forgiveness without ever offering an apology. I didn't respond to Mom's email, I didn't call, and weeks passed. Slowly, the weight on my chest started to lift. I focused on work, on myself, on rebuilding a life that wasn't centered around obligation and guilt. And for the first time in years, I felt free. No more walking on eggshells. No more dreading my phone ringing. No more second-guessing every boundary I set. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. I was going through an old box of photos when I found it. A picture from Thanksgiving, years ago. Before the money, before the expectations, before everything fell apart. We were all smiling, laughing, happy. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I let myself grieve. For the family I thought I had, for the people they used to be, for the love that had come with so many strings attached. Tears slipped down my face, but I didn't stop them. Because maybe, just maybe, this was what moving on really looked like. Not pretending I wasn't hurt, not waiting for an apology that would never come, but accepting the truth and choosing, finally, to let go. Letting go isn't a single moment. It's 100 little moments stretched across time until one day you wake up and realize you're free. And for the first time in my life, I was free. No more waiting for an apology that wasn't coming. No more wondering if I had done the right thing. No more guilt over people who had never felt guilty for using me. I had finally chosen myself. And that choice, it changed everything. Months passed. Life settled into something peaceful, something mine. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into things that actually mattered. I reconnected with old friends, went on spontaneous weekend trips, even tried hobbies I never had time for before. I built a life that didn't revolve around my family's needs. And God, it felt good. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. From Mom. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it, my hands steady. The letter was short, careful. "Emily, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Your father and I have lost a lot this year. Our home, our savings, the security we took for granted. But losing you, that was the hardest part. I don't deserve another chance. I know that. But I hope someday you'll let me try. No expectations, no demands, just a mother who misses her daughter." Mom, I sat there, staring at the paper, waiting to feel something. Anger, relief, sadness. But all I felt was caution, because people like my mother, people who spend years manipulating, taking, demanding, they don't change overnight. And I wasn't about to be pulled back into a cycle I had barely escaped. But still, this was different. For the first time, there was no blame, no guilt trip, just an acknowledgement of what had been lost. And maybe, just maybe, that was a start. I didn't respond right away. I let weeks pass. I let the weight of her words settle. And then, one morning, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, staring at my phone, debating whether to type out a response. Did I trust her? No. Did I miss her? Yeah. But missing someone doesn't mean you go back to them. So instead of falling into old patterns, I set a boundary. I sent a short reply. "I got your letter. I appreciate what you said. I'm not ready to rebuild anything yet, but if you really meant what you wrote, time will tell. Take care. No promises. No commitments. Just space." If she truly wanted to fix things, she'd prove it over time. And if she didn't, then I had already made my peace. A year passed. Jake and Lauren still struggled, bouncing between jobs, trying to recover from the mess they had created. My parents adjusted to their new reality, downsized home, part-time jobs, no more financial safety net. And me? I was happier than I had ever been. I had stopped looking back, stopped wondering what if, stopped mourning the version of my family I had always hoped for. Because the truth was, I had built something better. A life without guilt. A life without strings attached. A life that was finally my own. And if that made me selfish, then so be it. because for the first time, I wasn't surviving for anyone else. I was living for me. Stoppery too, I had no idea how drastically things would alter after that phone call. Just like any other Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my 14th floor office going over quarterly reports when my mother's number appeared on my phone. My coffee mug nearly fell. It had been years since she had phoned me. "Is that you, Laura?" Her voice sounded strained and strange. "Yes, Mother." "What's the matter?" I made an effort to speak in an impartial and businesslike manner. I was at work, after all, and at 29, leading a department required me to remain composed at all times. "Yesterday was your father's death. 3 days remain till the funeral." The remarks were like a kick to the stomach. They didn't notify me until today that Dad was gone. Grateful that I had indulged in this downtown apartment with its private office area, I clutched the edge of my desk. "What took place?" I was able to inquire. "Heart attack." He was working. Naturally, I could hear my sister Sarah's characteristic wailing in the background as her voice faded. He was at work, of course. He was always working, attempting to provide for my mother, who was unemployed, and my sister, who was 23 years old and had never worked in her life. Anger sprang in my throat, but I forced myself to swallow it. Why didn't I know about it at the time? We were stunned. "Laura, it all occurred so quickly." She hesitated. "At 2 p.m. On Friday, the funeral will take place. Are you coming? Would I attend?" The only person who had helped me when I made the decision to leave home and live alone was my father. The only person that joined me in celebrating my college graduation. The only one who contacted me frequently, even if it meant slinking away during his lunch break to do so, was Sarah, while Mom and Sarah were too busy shopping for Sarah's prom dress. "I will be there, of course," I spoke aggressively. I hung up and then sat looking out my window at the downtown skyline. I was reminded of how Sarah was always given preference by her mother. I was pushed aside more than once, similar to my time on the high school debate team. However, Mom took Sarah to her dancing recital, so she missing my first competition. Rather of being proud, my mother grumbled that I wouldn't have time to help Sarah with her homework once I started my first job at the age of 16. I departed as soon as I could because of this. I used part-time work and grants to pay for education. I worked my way up in the firm and found an apartment in the heart of the city. Dad knew he would come see me whenever he could, always bringing grins of pride and little presents. He was gone now. There were many individuals I hardly knew inside the funeral home, including parents, friends, co-workers, and distant cousins. They all came together to bid farewell to the guy who, at the age of 54, had worked himself to death. Mom and Sarah were positioned front and center, and I stood toward the back and watched as people came up to them to offer condolences while crying. Holding Mom's hand, Bo, Margaret, and Susan were asking her if she needed anything at all. Mom used a tissue to dab at her eyes. "Without Richard, things will be extremely difficult. Our entire source of revenue was from him. I'm not sure how we'll handle this at this point, you know." My jaw tightened. 3 more family members hurried to Sarah's aid as she broke down in tears once more. Her well-done hair and manicured nails caught my attention. Apparently, there were benefits to being unemployed. "He put forth a lot of effort for us," Mom went on, her voice echoing around the room. "Sarah and I are now the only ones without a job. I needed to go outside for a while." My growing rage was lessened by the chilly air. Just 2 weeks prior, Dad had contacted me and sounded more exhausted than normal. He had stated that to keep the females comfortable, and I had just done my second shift. "You are aware, I ought to have spoken out." Next, I stayed inside and listened to Mom's presentation about their financial difficulties for 2 more hours. Sarah did a great job portraying a powerless and distraught character. Neither of them brought up the fact that they had been looking for their own employment for years. At last, the final visitors were departing. Mom yelled out just as I was reaching for my coat. "Hold on, Laura. We must speak." Mom abruptly turned to me, her eyes welling with sorrow as I followed them into the kitchen. "I am aware that our relationship hasn't been going well, Laura. You always liked Sarah, and I know I disregarded you." Behind her, Sarah made a frown and rolled her eyes. "However, your father's passing has made me realize how fleeting life is. We must set aside our differences and reunite as a family." I wanted to yell at her and tell her that if her father hadn't put in extra hours to maintain their slack lifestyle, he may still be alive. That they were making a life off of his effort and labor while I was establishing my profession. I swallowed the words even though they burned in my throat. This was neither the place nor the time. Rather, the first question directly, why now? Is money at stake, Mom? Her expression changed to one of pain. What made you believe that? The house and some funds were given to us by your father. For the moment, we'll get by. All I want is the return of my daughter, I answered cautiously. I'm not against reconciling, but perhaps we should take it slow. Develop trust over time. Of course, said Mom, my dear. Whatever you believe is most appropriate. I sat in my living room, gazing at the city lights, as the journey back to my flat passed in a whirl. I couldn't help but wonder whether my mother was correct. Perhaps Dad's passing served as a wake-up call. We might be able to mend our friendship. She had acknowledged her errors after all. Mom called to invite me to supper a week after the burial. Her voice was warm with artificial joy as she continued, I'm making your favorite lasagna. Like the old days. That nearly made me chuckle. She had previously only prepared lasagna in response to Sarah's request. However, I reminded myself to give them a chance and consented to attend. The home was just as it had been during the burial, with the exception that Dad's shoes were no longer at the entrance where they usually were. When I walked in, Sarah was lying on the couch, hardly glancing up as she browsed through her phone. These days, everything is so costly. With a sigh, Mom took the lasagna out of the oven. When I saw the shopping bill, I almost passed out. And let's not even talk about the utilities. The electric provider must believe that we are wealthy, I observed as she plated the meal. Just once. I took note. Have you begun your job search yet? Trying to seem unbiased, I asked. She avoided looking at me and said, Oh, sweetie, the job market is terrible right now. Did you realize that the cost of cheese and the internet bill increased by 30%? Robbery on the highway? Sarah finally put down her phone long enough to attend the complaint festival. I tell you, at the dinner table. Everything is about twice as pricey, according to my pals. Right now. Who is meant to survive? I sipped my water, choose my words wisely. You know, these price rises aren't as obvious when you're employed and receiving a monthly salary. Mom and Sarah pretended not to hear, but the hand lingered in the air like smoke. Eventually, we'll find something. Mom kept pouring more wine into her glass. We'll only need to tighten our belts a little for the time being. That seems like a really good concept. Unable to control the sharpness in my voice, I spoke. Character development is greatly enhanced by belt tightening. The room's temperature appeared to drop by 10 degrees. Mom's grin hardened and brittle, and Sarah's face twisted into a frown. For the remainder of the evening, they hardly spoke at all, answering my attempts at dialogue with icy monosyllables. This trend persisted for a few weeks. I would join you for supper. Mom would gripe about the cost. They act as though they don't comprehend when I make scathing remarks about jobs. Everyone understood the moves to the strange dance, but they wouldn't recognize the music. After that, on Saturday, the second shoe dropped. Mom and I just finished washing the supper dishes. When she anxiously cleared her throat, We need to talk about something, Laura, honey. Yesterday, the washing machine malfunctioned. There is water everywhere. And you are aware of the high cost of repairs nowadays. It's coming, I thought. A new one is really needed. Sarah nodded heartily next to her as she went on. Would it be possible for you to? If you could provide the funds for it, that is. I gazed at them both, my sister's eager face and my mother's beseeching eyes. Sitting in this house filled with memories of Dad attempting to get by without his unwavering support made me feel awful for them. However, another portion recalled all the occasions they had used his kindness. As I watched their expressions drop, I firmly responded, I won't give you money. However, I'll purchase a washing machine for you myself. Mom had no option but to push her lips into a narrow line. All right, she murmured in a disappointed tone. If you'd like to do it that way. Although I could see that this wasn't the response they had hoped for, I wasn't going to give them money that would most likely never be used for a washing machine. Although it wasn't the best, the Whirlpool type of washing machine I selected was dependable and energy efficient. I took a half-day leave of absence to oversee the delivery and installation, which I planned for a Tuesday morning. Like a real estate agent inspecting a dubious property, Mom walked around the just-installed gadget. In a tone that said it was anything but pleasant, she said, "It's nice. However, at the appliance store, I noticed this stunning Samsung model. It had all these unique characteristics." I cut in while carrying my handbag. When you're prepared to purchase a washing machine of your own, the most expensive model they produce is available to you. Suddenly, Mom's displeasure turned to laughter. "Oh, honey, I'm just kidding. This is fantastic." "Really?" I nodded, momentarily not believing her. It felt like everything in the house chose to collapse all at once over the course of the following few months. It started with the refrigerator. After a single glance, the repairman concluded it was irreparable. Mom and I went shopping for appliances on a Sunday afternoon, and this time, she mysteriously kept her thoughts about price tags to herself. The dishwasher then broke down, causing the kitchen floor to flood. As though she had never heard of hand dishwashing, Sarah contacted me in a panic. She sobbed over the phone. "We can't live like this." So I put a dishwasher on my ever-expanding shopping list. Next was the coffee maker. "Mom reminded me that your father used to say that a house requires good coffee." Her voice was a little shaky. I got them a good Cuisinart model since I couldn't dispute my dad's memory. Every time I paid the repairman personally or made the purchases myself. Mom would imply that it would be simpler if I simply handed her the cash, but I refused to back down. Over the years, I'd witnessed far too much of Dad's money for house repairs go to Sarah's shopping excursions. The largest outlay was on the furniture for the living area. One evening, Mom talked about how the old sofa made her think too much of her father. How, after his long shifts, he would watch TV and fall asleep there. His old books and publications were in the cupboards, which were too unpleasant to look at. So I changed them all. New memories, new cabinets, and a new sofa. At least I knew exactly where the money was going with every transaction, even though my credit card suffered. I convinced myself that I was making their house cozier and assisting them in adjusting to life without Dad, but occasionally late at night, I questioned whether I was only encouraging their dependence in the same manner that Dad had done for so long. During another supper, Sarah virtually bounced in her chair as she revealed, "I got an interview. It's for a Thompson and Brooks administrative post." I almost choked while eating my meatloaf. Following months of ambiguous assurances on job searching, the first hard news was this. Mom smiled proudly as though Sarah had already been appointed CEO. "That's fantastic," I answered warily. "What time is it?" "Next week." Sarah pushed her slice around the dish in response. "However, there is a slight issue. I need to dress professionally. I assume you are aware of the significance of first impressions. HR personnel evaluate you based on such things. Together, we could go shopping." I made an offer. "I am aware of a few excellent locations for business attire." Sarah frowned as if I had proposed that we go garbage diving. "Laura, age 23, I believe I am able to shop for myself. I've already discovered the ideal suit. All I need is the cash to purchase it. It should cost about $500. For the next hour, they tag-teamed me. Sarah discussed how this position may be her big break. Mom recalled how she had assisted me in purchasing my first interview attire. She had ultimately run out of energy and was supporting Sarah's job search as a mom. I disregarded my own rule. I took out my phone and said, "Fine. I want to see this outfit when you receive it, but I'm sending $500. Sarah smiled as she gave me a hug. "There is no better big sister than you." I came into it a week later while perusing Instagram. Sarah, posing in what appeared to be a club, certainly not in an office outfit. She was dressed in a glistening crimson gown that most likely cost precisely $500. My blood boiled. I looked at more pictures. Sarah's dancing. Sarah taking pictures. In her interview outfit, Sarah is having a great time. I drove directly to my mother's place the following morning. At midday, Sarah was still in her jammies, perhaps suffering from a hangover. "How was the interview?" I asked in a kind way. "Good, huh?" Without looking at me, she muttered. "Excellent. That's fantastic. Could you show me your suit, the one you purchased using my funds?" Sarah's complexion turned white. "At the dry cleaners, that is." Taking out my phone, I said, "That's funny. Because your Instagram indicates that you bought a very different style of dress with my $500. Tears came to Sarah's eyes. Are you watching me? Publicly posting it is not snooping. Sarah, you lied to me. Did you never had an interview? You're really cruel, she cried. That clothing was necessary. I gave you that money for a job interview, and all of my pals were attending this party. Laura, Mom, cut in. Don't treat her harshly. She is young. She must also enjoy herself. That was it. The final straw. I'm done, I murmured, trembling. I have finished purchasing your appliances. In addition to renovating your house, I'm done paying you to perform phony job interviews. You're alone. As I drove away, I slammed the door on their complaints. I sensed animosity that had been building for years. They would never alter. They would never stop searching for the next lie, the next excuse, or the next freebie. Every time Mom and Sarah's names appeared on my phone for 3 weeks, I ignored their calls, texts, and voicemails. I had a combination of emotions, including relief at not having to put up with their drama any longer and rage at their treachery. Then December arrived, bringing memories of previous family Christmases and the first snowfall. The doorbell rang as I was at my apartment going over end-of-year reports. Mom was standing there in Dad's old winter coat when I opened the door. Laura, she muttered. Can we have a conversation? I paused, but my throat constricted as I saw Dad's coat. Due to Mom's hectic schedule with Sarah, he wore it to every parent-teacher conference and function at my school. Christmas is on the way, Mom added. Her breath was audible in the chilly corridor. Holidays are for family, according to your father. She was correct. It was a favorite statement of Dad's. Mom appeared unusually quiet as Sarah peered out from behind. Please, Mom's voice broke. Only 5 minutes. Already questioning whether I was making a mistake, I moved aside to let them entry. As I went to prepare tea, they took a seat on my couch. Dad's answer to all problems. My anxiety was reduced by the comforting routine of brewing and pouring. Mom responded, We miss you, as I gave her a cup. Without you, the place feels deserted. Sarah gripped her teacup and nodded. I apologize for the dress issue, she muttered. I was wrong to lie. I took a seat and saw the steam rising from my tea. A tired grief had taken the place of the rage that had kept me going for weeks. Perhaps Dad would have preferred that we try again. Perhaps there were second opportunities throughout the holidays. Mom reached for my hand and murmured, I just want us to be a real family again. It would have saddened your father to see us like way. For what seemed like the first time in years, we talked for the next hour. I had never heard the stories Mom told about Dad before. I was shown photos from Sarah's real job hunt, or so she said. It was pleasant, typical, as if we might be able to use the ashes of our previous relationships to create something new. My phone buzzed with a notice from my bank app the next day at work. $300 was charged at Nordstrom. Before I had time to comprehend what I was witnessing, $450 at Saks is another notice. My hands are trembling. I launched the application. During the past hour, I have made many purchases at upscale clothes boutiques. I phoned the bank right away. Yes, I must immediately disable my card and report any fraudulent charges. After ensuring that the card was barred, I spoke in a tight, angry voice. I went over the charges one more. Then I recalled that yesterday before they left, Sarah had wanted to use my restroom. While she was in there, she must have rummaged through my handbag. I looked at the time, 3:45 p.m. This couldn't wait, even though the workday wouldn't conclude for another 2 hours. After gathering my belongings and informing my assistant that I had a family emergency, I made my way to my car. Without knocking, I rushed in the front door. My hands are trembling with anger. The new sofa had Sarah spread out over it. Surrounded by shopping bags from upscale boutiques, I purchased them. Her eyes seldom left her phone. I demanded that my credit card be returned. My voice was shaking, right now. Mom wiped her hands on a dish towel and rushed in from the kitchen. Why are you creating such a fuss, Laura, my dear? She took from me. Mom, she stole my credit card yesterday after searching through my handbag. Reaching into her high-end handbag, Sarah rolled her eyes. Most likely took out my credit card and made the purchase using my stolen card. All right, this is the return of your valuable card. All I needed was a few items for the Christmas gathering. And recently, you're usually so frugal. I grabbed the card out of her grasp. Stingy. I got you all the furnishings and appliances in a whole house, and you steal to pay me back? Don't accuse your sister of stealing, Mom intervened. She blushed. All she needed for the holidays were some good clothing. She wouldn't have needed to take matters into her own hands if you weren't so self-centered with your money. I gave them a look, observed them closely. Standing there, arrogant and self-righteous, my mother defends thievery as though it were nothing out of the ordinary. Surrounded by proof of her wrongdoing, Sarah continues to play the victim. Despite being in front of the TV, they were seated on the sofa. I probably bought the coffee maker with the intention of making coffee later, but all of a sudden, an idea struck me. A strategy started to take shape. I inhaled deeply and tried to smile. Mom, you know what? You could be correct. I may have been too strict when it comes to money. I mean, it's Christmas. Why don't we celebrate Christmas here this year with all of the family members? Mom's expression brightened. That would be amazing, honey. I'll give everyone a call immediately. We can do it on the eve of Christmas, similar to your childhood, during the course of the next days. I did my part flawlessly. I wholeheartedly agreed to everything when my mother called to talk about holiday arrangements. In my finest Christmas attire, I even arrived early on December 24th. Mom added, "We need to get some last-minute party supplies. Do you mind?" Naturally. I gave them several $100 after taking out my wallet. Obtain what you require. To get to their car, they virtually ran, most likely worried that as they rounded the corner, I would decide to alter my mind. I took my phone out. It's Laura Wilson indeed. Now the movers can arrive. I had made all the arrangements beforehand. Movers who were prepared to labor for double money on Christmas Eve. A storage facility on the other side of town. A little moving truck even. They showed there in a matter of minutes, obviously ready to get their Christmas bonus. Everything I had bought over the previous few months was completed, one by one. It began with the washing machine, the fridge, the dishwasher, the coffee maker. Sarah's stolen things were counted on the sofa, the cabinets, everything. At last, I put a little, meticulously wrapped package beneath their Christmas tree. I gave the partially deserted home one more glance. I was thinking back to all the days that Mom and Sarah were out shopping, and Dad and I would sit in this room and have quiet discussions. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone began to ring. Mom's frantic voice burst through the speaker while I was sitting in my apartment sipping a glass of wine and watching the snow fall outside my window. Someone has robbed us. Everything was taken by someone who broke in. The refrigerator, the washing machine, and every piece of furniture. Everything is gone, if you hadn't gone anywhere. I sipped my wine again. Mom, you were not robbed. I took everything. Everything I've purchased in the last several months. Now it's in storage. This is not possible. Mom let out a cry. I'm going to call the cops. That really made me giggle. Proceed. I have a present for you. Beneath the tree. You should open it, by the way. As she tore open the gift, I heard her storming across the room and the sound of paper rustling. It is only a collection of receipts. What sort of foolish present is this? Mom, they aren't simply receipts. They serve as evidence that I bought each and everything I took out today. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, I paid for it, everything. Seeing those will be of great interest to the police. I'm positive. Additionally, you might want to explain Sarah's little credit card buying binge while you're at it. Your vengeful little mother's voice broke out in anger. You have no right to treat us like way on Christmas Eve. What should we say to everyone? I'm not sure. Perhaps the fact that you and Sarah have been subsisting on your father's income, and my kindness in not wanting to work, that my credit card was stolen by Sarah, that her theft was justified by you. I blocked her number after hanging up. It was Christmas Day morning. My phone rang once more. It was my cousin Rachel this time. Laura, I'm very sorry. She could hardly talk because she was laughing so much. What occurred last night will astound you. Tell me everything. Margaret began to tell everyone, Ed, how ungrateful you were and how you had taken all of their furniture on Christmas Eve. Uncle Bob then questioned why, with all the money they had saved from years of not working, they hadn't purchased their own furnishings. And Susan added that your father, Uncle Richard, had informed her that he was working extra hours to provide for them. Over the next 3 weeks, I could see the situation in my mind's eye. First furious, then appealing, then desperate. The texts came pouring in. They couldn't afford groceries. according to Mom. She had learned her lesson, Sarah vowed. They had to make amends. They had evolved. I was missed. They cherished me. Every new number was blocked by me. They used to get in touch with me, alter my email address, and delete me from all of my social media accounts. I wonder how they're doing sometimes, if they sold the house and eventually found employment. If all of this taught them anything. However, such ideas no longer keep me up at night. Story 3. I never imagined receiving that call. During the economics course given by Professor Martinez, I was startled by my phone's abrupt vibration, and my heart fell when I saw my mother flash across the screen. I somehow knew Emily, and Dad had been battling pancreatic illness for months. Mom's voice broke. Your dad? He is no longer there. All of a sudden, the lecture hall seemed too tiny, overly packed. 21 years old. I believed that I was ready for this. I had discussed it with Dad when I was last at home, when the physician declared that the therapy was no longer effective. He had informed me while squeezing my hand, my courageous young lady, you'll be all right. However, nothing can truly prepare you for losing your dad. Growing up, I had always been my father's little girl. I had learned how to ride a bike from him, drive me to college tours after helping me with my math assignments. Mom had more of an open mind. She had never had a permanent work since she preferred to concentrate on her many interests and social activities. Dad liked seeing Mom happy and didn't hate his work as a financial advisor because he supplied for us well. After receiving approval to take a leave of absence from the dean's office, I took the first train home that was offered. I had time to reflect on the last several months throughout the 3-hour drive. Even with his condition, Dad had been quite systematic. He made certain that I paid him many visits, engaged in lengthy conversations with me about my future, and often expressed his pride in my choice to pursue a degree in business administration. Mom was waiting at the door when I got to our 2-story suburban house. Her face was streaked with mascara. Her beautiful blouse was soaked with tears as she embraced me tightly. What am I going to do, Emily? I haven't worked on any of the bills for this house in 20 years. Seeing the half-empty wine glass on the counter, I dated her to the kitchen. We must first attend to the funeral preparations, Mom. Did Dad leave any instructions? She gave his home office a hazy wave. It's all on his desk. He was usually so well prepared. She grabbed the glass of wine. Funeral arrangements took up the following 2 days. I had to coordinate with the funeral home, phone family, and take care of all the preparations while Mom soothed herself with more wine since she appeared incapable of managing any decisions and would cry every time I asked her what she thought about the service program or the flowers. The funeral morning came bright and clear. People poured into our home, bringing casseroles and condolences. Throughout the service, Mom put on quite a show, falling down in tears many times. Mom nodded excitedly when I saw her friend Sandra massage her back and mumble something in her ear. What a great man your father was. I kept hearing from relatives that he always planned ahead and looked out for his family. I composed myself and smiled sweetly. My father wouldn't have wanted me to disintegrate. I was stronger than that because of his upbringing. Nevertheless, I couldn't help but ponder what changes this loss would bring to our life as I watched them bury his casket. Mom and I attended the reading of Dad's will at Mr. Peterson's legal office 1 week following the funeral. Mom continued to fumble with her pearl necklace. Dad's 20th anniversary present. Mr. Peterson read in his controlled, exact voice after adjusting his spectacles. I, Robert James Harrison, now proclaim this to be my final will and testament, since I am of sound mind and body. I paid close attention as he described the specifics. He reached the major provisions, and Mom's fidgeting suddenly ceased. To Emily Harrison, my darling daughter, I leave our family home with $200,000 in my possession. Mom's head jerked upward. Beside me, I sensed her anxiousness. I leave $1,500 every month to my wife, Catherine Harrison, to be deposited into my retirement fund. That's all. Mom's voice broke. His wife is me, 23 years of marriage. And I receive this. Mr. Peterson's voice was soft but authoritative. Miss S. Harrison, your spouse gave these arrangements a lot of thought. The will is enforceable and correctly performed. He should be accepted for his choice. With her fingers squeezing her necklace so tightly that I was afraid it could shatter, Mom murmured something beneath her breath. All she could say on the tense journey home was that he was unjust and that she couldn't believe he would do this. I prepared a modest meal for us that evening, Dad's go-to spaghetti dish. Mom eventually looked up at me after pushing the food about her plate. I simply don't get it, Emily. Her tone faltered. What made your father leave you everything? All that money, the house? What am I expected to do, really? What am I meant to do? I grabbed her hand from the other side of the table. You don't need to travel anyplace, Mom. While I'm in college, you may stay and take care of the house. We'll both benefit from it. Mom's whole attitude shifted. She gave my hand a squeeze. Her eyes were filled with tears. You are the world's greatest daughter, Emily. You wouldn't disappoint me, I knew. After a few days, I went back to college and used the account my father gave me to set up automatic payments for the house, utilities, and property taxes. I started calling Mom on Skype on a regular basis. She told me about the painting lessons she had taken to help her deal with her loss, and she appeared to be getting better. However, as the weeks stretched into months, we started to communicate differently. Quick phone chats that got shorter each time took the place of the Skype calls. Mom had something to do or somewhere to go. I reassured myself that she was busy and that perhaps this was how she was getting better. With the promise of Christmas in the air and a coating of snow, December came. I made the decision to surprise my mother with an early Christmas visit after months of our phone conversations becoming progressively shorter. Memories of past Christmases from the train station filled the train trip home. I watched familiar streets go by as I rode in a cab home. I silently opened the front door with my key, preparing to take Mom by surprise. Coffee and cinnamon filled the house. That hadn't changed, at least. However, from the living room, I heard laughter, Mom's voice and instructions. I froze as soon as I entered the doorway. A man I had never seen before was seated next to Mom on our couch. He held her hand while sporting an artistic scarf, making him appear perhaps 5 years younger than she was. They appeared totally at ease with one another as they sat near to one another and laughed over something. Emily. When Mom spotted me, she gave a little start. Of course I didn't anticipate you. Still standing at the doorway, I said, I wanted to give you a Christmas surprise, since we usually spend it as a family, you know. There was an uncomfortable quiet in the room. I saw that the man was wearing his father's slippers when he got to his feet. Sweetheart. Mom's voice sounded abnormally high. I want to introduce you to James. She stopped and looked at each of us. My spouse. 3 months ago, we were married. I must have heard it wrong. I apologize. Husband, did you say? Like, married? Yes, dear. In my art class, we fell in love. Do you recall the one I mentioned? James is also an artist. We just got in touch. She was utilizing her to explain in a childlike tone. The one that made me wild every time. I mentally calculated it 3 months ago. Dad has only been gone 7 months, Mom. She quickly corrected after 8 months. And you just know, Emily, when you'll find love again. I didn't want to interfere with your academics, so I kept it a secret. With school, you've been really busy. For the first time, I truly noticed it as I scanned the room. The modern-looking chair that didn't blend with anything else had taken the place of Dad's favorite reading chair. 6 months ago, Mom would have detested the abstract bursts of color that were the new paintings on the walls. And there's a big wedding photo of Mom and this James person on the mantle where Dad's family pictures used to be. You didn't ask me before moving him into my residence. Before I could stop them, the words were released. Mom's expression tensed. This is also my home, Emily. I take it you stated so yourself? I inhaled deeply, attempting to emulate my father's calm handling of challenging circumstances. Then, I suppose, we ought to get to know one another. What do you do for a living, James? His smile fell short of his eyes. Yes, you are aware of the current situation, the employment market, and the economy. He began with a narrative about his most recent exhibition appearance before inexplicably launching into a humorous tale about his mother's painting style that made her laugh like a teenager. I tried again, but what do you do for a living now? His smile wavered a bit. I'm now seeking for the ideal opportunity and am in between employment. Something that truly appeals to my artistic side, you know? He is a creative person. Emily. Mom sprang on the defense. A corporate 9-to-5 job cannot constrain him. His vision was just incomprehensible to his previous employer. Some individuals don't value actual originality because they are too traditional. I awoke to the sound of dishes clattering downstairs on Christmas morning. Mom was arranging our finest china when I followed the commotion to the kitchen, setting out a lot more place settings than normal, and using the set Dad had given her on their 20th anniversary. Are we expecting guests, Mom? Taking a coffee mug out of the cabinet, I inquired. She was working so hard that she seldom looked up. Yes, exactly. Christmas dinner is being hosted by James's family. Emily? They're such sweet folks. You'll see. How about the Andersons? I asked my father. As far back as I could recall, Sister Sarah and her family had been with us every Christmas. Aunt Jenny and Uncle Mike, too. Mom's hands hesitated over the cutlery for a moment. Now things are different, Emily. I have to establish ties with James's family. They are now a part of our life. The doorbell rang before I could answer. I was left alone in the kitchen with the ghost of Christmas past, while Mom rushed to respond. James's relatives showed there in a clamorous group. His sister Rachel, her husband, and their 2 children, as well as his parents, who surveyed the house with approving eyes. They instantly spread out to investigate over supper, acting as though they owned the area. Mom continued to look at me anxiously while James's relatives took up the talk. Their neighborhood's property taxes were the source of his father's complaints. His mother offered better recipes and critiqued the bird. As I pushed food about my plate, I reflected on past Christmases that were warm and full of sincere familial affection. Rachel then set down her fork and grinned broadly. You are aware of how well situated this property is. It is close to the reputable school. This house is simply sitting here with all this additional room, and the kids need a solid school district. Oh, how lovely that would be, Mom cried out. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have you nearby? Emily? Something broke inside of me. It was the culmination of all the stress and annoyance of the previous few days. No, in fact, we wouldn't. I spoke aggressively. I live here. I was left to do it by Dad, not to your mother, and most definitely not to outsiders who wished to take over and move in. There was silence in the room. Her husband began grumbling about ungrateful young people as Rachel's cheeks flushed. Nowadays, James's parents looked at each other thoughtfully. His mother gave him a stern tongue click. However, I hardly heard them. Mom was gazing back at me with an expression I had never seen her make before. Anger, shame, and something more that appeared to be close to hatred. James's family left shortly after I lost my temper. Clearly, we're not welcome here, Rachel said, kicking her kids in the direction of the door. In any case, I wouldn't want to live in this place. This house seemed like a curse because of her focus on it. Mom blew up as soon as the door shut behind them. How were you able to? Her face was flushed with rage as she yelled, Are you aware of what you have done? My new family is this group? No, Mom, I answered, maintaining my composure as my father had taught me. They were preparing to take over my house as if they already owned it, and they are James's relatives. Your home? Bitterly, she laughed. Our family lived here, a long time before your father made the decision to prefer certain people over others. I said firmly, I did the right thing. And perhaps Dad was correct about everything if you are unable to recognize that. After all, there was a cold quiet for the remainder of my vacation. When I was around, Mom and James vanished into their room. Sarah sobbed when she learned that she had been left out of Christmas dinner, and I spent the majority of my time with my dad's family. Uncle Mike just remarked, Your father would be devastated to see this, and shook his head pitifully. I believed that the distance would help things get better when I went back to college. I was mistaken. Mom called once more, but this time they were different. Right now, she hardly inquired about my life or my academics. Rather, every discussion centered on money. During one call, she remarked, Emily, James and I are having a hard time. These days, the monthly stipend hardly covers anything. We require assistance. Perhaps it's time for you both to find work, Mom. I made a gentle suggestion. There was a pause in the line. You dare? At last, she snarled. Your mommy is me. I reared you, and now you're behaving like a cold-blooded stranger. There was a click to stop the call. My phone rang with a message from her an hour later. Dramatic text is displayed after a picture of an empty refrigerator. When we die of starvation, you will feel guilty about it. I gazed at the message for a while, recalling how my mother used to guilt-trip my father in a similar manner. When she asked for anything, he would often comply, claiming it was simpler than arguing. I ended up moving funds from Dad's account to hers, even though I knew better. It started to happen frequently. Her fervent entreaties, my hesitant transfers, and her fleeting appreciation were followed by additional demands. As I completed my undergraduate education, Mom and James lived in my home for the following few months. They texted me to say they were too busy with an art show to attend my graduation ceremony. I knew it was because the previous month I had ceased sending additional money, fed up with supporting their way of life. I made the decision to go back home after graduating. My mother's reaction to my ideas was, at best, ambivalent. "Oh," she answered flatly, "you're moving back. It must be your residence then." Her emphasis on your residence made me think of Rachel's voice on Christmas Day. It was quick to find a job. I was able to secure a job with Anderson and Mills Financial Services because to Dad's previous financial industry ties. Appreciating the diversion from the escalating circumstances at home, I immersed myself into the task. Mom and James, on the other hand, developed their own schedule that did not include employment. The majority of Mom's $1,500 monthly stipend from Dad's retirement money went toward entertaining James's family. Every weekend, James's family would spread out over our living room, sipping wine and evaluating one another's artwork during another dinner party or creative get-together. I became aware of the mounting costs. Since I was away at college, the utilities had increased. It seems that a lot of heat and hot water were necessary for creative spirits. Mom's regular parties resulted in enormous grocery costs. And every time I got home from food shopping, I somehow took responsibility for everything. In one of their parties, half the food would go. In the kitchen, I would hear Rachel, James's sister, laughing while she helped herself to the goodies I had purchased for my work lunches, and I would discover empty wine bottles in the recycle bin. Your mom is really giving. After 3 months of this arrangement, Rachel said one evening that, in contrast to some of the others in this home, the breaking point had arrived. When Mom confronted me in the kitchen, she neglected to remind me that the property taxes were due, and I had just completed paying them. "Emily, I think we should talk seriously." "I actually wanted to talk to you too, Mom," but she interrupted. Her face took on the expression she was accustomed to when she made demands on her father. Today, Margaret shared something fascinating with me. "Julie, her daughter, is employed in your division." I felt sick to my stomach. Julie? Naturally, the workplace gossip. "According to her, your monthly income is $4,600. Mom narrowed her eyes and went on. "Look at the way you treat your family, though. Little spending on food, whining about each and every charge, causing James to feel bad about his art materials. You're acting greedily and selfishly, like your father said I was for all those years." The venom in her words startled me as I looked at her. With a hauntingly composed tone, she went on, "So here's what's going to happen. Every month, you will pay me your whole wage. If you act like a good daughter, I'll handle the home bills and return perhaps a third or perhaps half of the money. If you begin treating James and his family with the deference they deserve..." Incredulous, I stood in my kitchen and looked at my mother. Like a feudal ruler, the lady who had brought my school lunches, caressed my scratched knees, and sobbed in my arms during my father's burial was now demanding my whole paycheck. I firmly stated, "I'm not giving you my salary. Indeed, perhaps it's time for you and James to get employment. I'm sick of helping you." A nasty frown twisted her face. "You deserve less money than your father left you. $200,000. You're also too self-centered to tell your own mother." A headache began to grow behind my eyes. "We will discuss this tomorrow." As I turned to go, I said, "When your thoughts are clearer." When I arrived downstairs for breakfast the following morning, Mom and James were seated at the table, looking like they had just snatched a canary. The fragrance of manipulation and coffee filled the kitchen. "Emily, please." Mom started talking. "James and I had a lengthy conversation last night, honey." James, who was wearing another of the pricey sweaters I had almost paid for, nodded wisely next to her. "We've created the ideal solution," she added. "You should compensate us for our services, since we take such fantastic care of the house cleaning, cooking, and keeping everything." James gave a kind grin. "We believe that $4,600, your entire pay, would be just recompense." I sipped my coffee slowly. allowing the ridiculousness of their suggestion to set in. Dust bunnies the size of real rabbits lived in the house they say they maintain. Mom probably hadn't cooked since before she met James in maintenance. Every time a light bulb needed to be changed, they phoned me. "What do you know?" "Slowly," I said. "You're correct. Payment should be made for services rendered. Like Christmas trees, their faces glowed." Mom grabbed James's hand and gave it a victorious squeeze, but I persisted. "Since there haven't been any services to speak of, I won't be needing your services any longer." The smiles froze on their faces, unless you consider entertaining and sipping wine to be household chores. To my surprise, I felt so at ease that I got up from the table. "You two should leave my house. I'll be getting in touch with a lawyer regarding formal eviction procedures, and you have 7 days to locate a new residence." When Mom understood I was serious, the color left her face. She grabbed one of her father's old plates from the table and sprang out of her chair. You're a little ungrateful. Shatter it, and I'll take it out of your next allowance," I stated icily. "Verify. As well as anything else you might have harmed in your outburst." Mom didn't drop the dish despite her trembling fingers. I turned and went to my room upstairs. I could hear my mother screaming behind me and then crying. The sound of items being banged about in the kitchen, James's attempts at comfort. However, I felt like I was doing precisely what my father would have wanted me to accomplish for the first time since his passing. A few hours later, I heard a gentle knock on the door of my bedroom. "Emily, my dear." The pleasant, syrupy tone of Mom's voice had returned. "Can we have a conversation?" I opened the door, but I remained in the entryway, preventing her from entering my personal area. She had put on the sweater she used to wear while pleading with her father to purchase her a pricey item, and she had done her makeup. I was only making a joke about the cash. She tried to chuckle lightly as she spoke. "James and I merely want to continue living with you. We don't need your pay. After all, we are family." "No, Mom," I said, suddenly feeling exhausted. "I've already decided. You must locate a location of your own." She attempted every manipulation strategy in her playbook over the course of the following several days. She wrote heartfelt messages beneath my door. She said they change, so she dispatched James to argue their case. She also attempted to guilt-trip me by showing me additional pictures of overdue bills and bare cabinets. I ordered takeaway to my room and stopped having meals with them. My new reality was accompanied by the sound of their voices below, which alternated between arguments and plotting their next move. They were packed when I got home from work a week later. I could hear every item hitting the cardboard as Mom threw items into boxes in a theatrical manner. "I hope all is well with you." When she witnessed me hurling your own mother out into the street, she spat. James folded his arms as he stood behind her. "You ended up being a daughter." When their automobile drew away that night, they departed in a whirlwind of doors slamming and profanity. I entered the house that was, at last, really mine. News began to go around the family over the course of the following several weeks, and Sarah called to inform me that my mother was disparaging me to everybody who would listen, saying that I had evicted her in a horrible manner out of sheer resentment. But Aunt Sarah told me not to worry. We all recall her treatment of your father. This time, no one is falling for her victim act. According to Uncle Mike, Mom and James attempted to move in with Rachel, the sister who had attempted to occupy my home at Christmas. She flatly rejected them. He laughed. All of a sudden, they are flawless. The new family was no longer flawless. James's parents likewise declined to take them in, even though they had spent many hours at my house attending Mom's parties. Once the complimentary wine and canapes stopped coming, even their public support vanished. Eventually, Mom used her dad's money each month to pay the rent on a little apartment across town. For the first time since she became an adult, she needed a genuine career, a sales job at a boutique in the area. As usual, James continued to argue that he was too creative for a normal job and remained unemployed. At the grocery store, I once ran into her. Without all of her pricey lotions and salon visits, she strangely appeared older and different. She moved her cart swiftly in the opposite way after beginning to turn along my aisle. Standing at the home of my father, after several months, I felt at last prepared to make adjustments. I purchased gardening equipment and paint samples that weekend. The home that had witnessed so much suffering and drama would undergo a transformation. When I was organizing the remodeling, I came to see that occasionally tearing something down is necessary to strengthen a backup.